The scorching sun hung mercilessly in the vast Montana sky as Willow O'Hara's wagon wheel snapped with a sickening crack, sending the vehicle lurching dangerously toward the edge of a steep ravine. Her heart stopped as she saw her 4-year-old daughter Emma's terrified face, the child's tiny hands gripping the wooden seat as the wagon tilted precariously over the drop. In that moment of pure terror, Willow knew they were doomed until the thundering hooves of an approaching rider reached her ears. Montana Territory, 1878. Willow had been traveling for 3 weeks, her possessions packed into the modest wagon, her daughter her only companion as they made their way west. Her husband Thomas had died 6 months prior from pneumonia, leaving behind mounting debts and a small life insurance policy that barely covered what they owed. With nothing left in Boston, Willow had answered an advertisement seeking a schoolteacher in the growing settlement of Silver Creek. She'd never imagined she'd find herself in such peril, the rear wheel of her wagon splintered beyond repair, the entire vehicle teetering dangerously on the edge of a 30-foot drop. Emma's whimpers cut through Willow like a knife. "Mama." Emma cried, her small voice trembling as the wagon creaked ominously. "Don't move, sweetheart," Willow commanded, trying to keep her own voice steady. "Stay very still." The sound of hooves grew louder, and Willow turned to see a rider approaching fast. As he drew closer, she could make out a tall man with broad shoulders atop a magnificent chestnut stallion. He wore a worn leather vest over a faded blue shirt, a Stetson pulled low over his eyes. "Hold on," he shouted, dismounting his horse with practiced ease before it had fully stopped. The man assessed the situation in seconds. The wagon was balanced precariously, the broken wheel causing it to tilt toward the ravine. Any sudden movement could send it over. "Name's Blake Quinn," he said, his voice calm despite the urgency of the situation. "I'm going to get you both out of there." Willow nodded, too frightened to speak. Blake moved carefully toward the wagon, testing the ground with each step. "The little one first," he said, eyeing the unstable wagon. "When I reach for her, you need to hand her to me nice and easy. No sudden movements." Willow nodded again, gathering Emma into her arms. The wagon shifted slightly and she froze. "That's it," Blake encouraged. "Now real slow, bring her toward me." With trembling hands, Willow lifted Emma toward the cowboy. Blake reached out, his strong arms bridging the gap between them. His fingers closed around Emma's small frame, and with gentle strength, he pulled her from Willow's grasp and set her safely on solid ground. Emma immediately began to cry, but Blake turned his attention back to Willow. "Now it's your turn, madam," he said, extending his hand once more. Willow reached for him, her heart pounding. As their fingers touched, the wagon gave a final groan and shifted again. Blake lunged forward, gripping Willow's wrist firmly and pulling her toward him with such force that she collided with his chest, just as the wagon broke free and tumbled down into the ravine with a series of crashes. For a moment they stood frozen, Willow pressed against Blake's solid chest, his arms around her protectively. She could feel his heart beating as rapidly as her own. "Thank you," she whispered, suddenly aware of their closeness. She stepped back, smoothing her dusty skirts with shaking hands. Blake tipped his hat. "Just glad I came along when I did." His eyes were the color of a summer sky, Willow noticed, and they crinkled slightly at the corners when he spoke. Emma ran to Willow, wrapping her small arms around her mother's legs. "Mama, the wagon's gone." Reality crashed down on Willow. The wagon was indeed gone, along with everything they owned. Their clothes, their food, all their possessions vanished in an instant. She felt lightheaded with despair. "Are you headed to Silver Creek by any chance?" Blake asked, watching her face carefully. "Yes," Willow replied, surprised. "How did you know?" "Mayor Thompson mentioned a schoolteacher was coming. Town's been waiting on you for near 2 weeks now." "We were delayed in Fort Benton," Willow explained, still dazed. "And now?" She gestured helplessly toward the ravine. Blake assessed the situation with a practical eye. Silver Creek's about 10 miles west. You and your daughter can ride with me. We'll come back for whatever can be salvaged tomorrow." "I couldn't impose," Willow began, but Blake cut her off. "Madam, there's no other choice unless you plan to walk 10 miles with a child before nightfall." Willow looked at Emma's tired face and nodded her acceptance. Within minutes, Blake had helped them onto his horse, settling Emma in front of him and Willow behind, her arms hesitantly encircling his waist. "Hold tight," he instructed, and they set off toward Silver Creek. As they rode, Willow learned that Blake owned a cattle ranch just outside of town. He'd been returning from delivering a prize bull to a neighboring ranch when he'd heard the commotion from her accident. "Silver Creek's a good place," Blake told her over his shoulder. "Small but growing, folk are friendly for the most part." "For the most part?" Willow questioned. Blake chuckled. "Every town has its characters, madam. You'll meet them soon enough." They arrived in Silver Creek as the sun was beginning its descent. The town consisted of one main street lined with wooden buildings, a general store, a saloon, a small hotel, and various other businesses. People stopped to stare as Blake rode in with Willow and Emma. "Blake Quinn, what have you brought us?" called a portly man hurrying from the direction of a building marked Mayor's office. "Found your schoolteacher, Mayor Thompson," Blake replied, dismounting before helping Willow and Emma down. "Had a bit of trouble on the road. Wagon went over the East Ravine." Mayor Thompson's jovial expression turned to concern. "My word, are you both all right, Mrs. O'Hara?" "Willow O'Hara," she supplied, smoothing Emma's hair. "And yes, thanks to Mr. Quinn, we're unharmed. But I'm afraid all our belongings." "Don't you worry about that," Mayor Thompson assured her. "We've got the schoolhouse all ready for you with living quarters attached, and I'm sure the ladies of the town will be more than happy to help with whatever you need until your things can be recovered." Blake cleared his throat. "If you don't mind, I'll take Mrs. O'Hara and her daughter to get settled. Been a long day for them." Mayor Thompson nodded eagerly. Of course. The schoolhouse is just down at the end of the street, and Blake good man for helping them out." Blake tipped his hat and led Willow and Emma toward the schoolhouse. It was a simple but sturdy wooden building with large windows and a small bell tower. The living quarters were attached to the back, two small but clean rooms with basic furniture. "It's not much," Blake said, sounding almost apologetic. "It's perfect," Willow replied honestly. After the ordeal they'd been through, the simple rooms seemed like a palace. "I'll bring by some supplies in the morning," Blake said, hesitating at the door. "And we'll see what can be salvaged from your wagon, Mr. Quinn," Willow called as he turned to leave. "I don't know how to thank you." Blake smiled, and something in his expression made Willow's heart flutter unexpectedly. "Blake," he corrected, "and you don't need to thank me, Mrs. O'Hara. Anyone would have done the same." "Willow," she offered in return, "and I don't believe just anyone would have acted with such courage and kindness." Blake's smile deepened, and he tipped his hat once more before departing. Left alone with Emma, Willow explored their new home. The larger room contained a bed, a small table with chairs, and a cast iron stove. The smaller room had a narrow bed that would be perfect for Emma. Simple, yes, but it was theirs. A knock at the door revealed a group of women bearing food, blankets, and clothing. Leading them was a cheerful woman who introduced herself as Beatrice, the general store owner's wife. "We heard what happened," Beatrice explained. "Can't have our new schoolteacher going without, now can we?" Overwhelmed by the kindness of strangers, Willow fought back tears. "Thank you all so much." As promised, Blake arrived early the next morning with his wagon. "Thought we'd go see what's left of your things," he explained, leaving Emma in Beatrice's care. Willow joined Blake for the journey back to the ravine. In the clear light of morning, she could see just how miraculous their escape had been. The wagon lay in splintered ruins at the bottom of the steep slope. "Stay here," Blake instructed, making his way carefully down to the wreckage. For the next hour, he salvaged what he could, a trunk containing some of their clothing, miraculously intact, a few books, some household items, and a small box of Willow's personal treasures, including her wedding ring and a miniature portrait of her late husband. "Thank you," Willow said softly as Blake handed her the box. "This means more to me than you know." Blake nodded, his eyes lingering on the portrait. "Your husband?" he asked. "Yes. Thomas died last winter." "I'm sorry for your loss," Blake said, and Willow could tell he meant it. "It's not easy being alone. You speak from experience?" Willow asked, suddenly curious about this man who had saved their lives. Blake loaded the last of the salvaged items into his wagon before answering. "My wife died in childbirth 5 years ago, our son with her." Willow's heart ached for him. "I'm so sorry, Blake," he shrugged, but she could see the pain still lingered. "Life goes on," he said simply. "We adapt." On the journey back to Silver Creek, Willow found herself studying Blake's profile. He was handsome in a rugged way, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often despite his loss. His hands were strong and capable on the reins, the same hands that had pulled her to safety. Over the next few weeks, as Willow settled into her role as Silver Creek schoolteacher, Blake became a frequent visitor. He brought fresh milk from his ranch, helped repair a leak in the schoolhouse roof, and sometimes simply stopped by to check on them. Emma adored him, running to the door whenever she heard his horse approaching. One evening in late September, after Emma had gone to bed, Willow and Blake sat on the small porch of the schoolhouse, watching the stars emerge. "You've done wonders with the school," Blake remarked. 15 students now, isn't it?" Willow nodded, pleased. "The children are eager to learn, even some of the older boys who I was warned might be troublesome." "That's because they respect you," Blake said, "same as everyone else in town." Willow felt herself blush at the compliment. "And what about you, Blake Quinn? Do you respect the new school teacher too?" Blake turned to look at her, his expression serious in the fading light. "I respect her, and I admire her courage, her intelligence, and her kindness." He paused. "I find myself thinking about her far too often for my own good." Willow's heart quickened. "Blake, I know it's too soon," he interrupted. "You're still grieving your husband, and you've only just arrived in Silver Creek. But I wanted you to know that if you're ever ready, I'd be honored to court you properly." Willow was silent for a long moment. Her feelings for Blake had grown steadily since the day he rescued them, but guilt had kept her from acknowledging them. Thomas had only been gone for 9 months. "I don't expect an answer now," Blake said gently, rising to his feet. "Just something to consider." As autumn deepened into winter, Blake continued to be a steady presence in Willow and Emma's lives. He never pressed for an answer to his proposition, content to simply be near them. He brought firewood when the first snows came, taught Emma how to make snow angels, and escorted Willow to the town's Christmas gathering. It was at this gathering that Willow realized just how deeply her feelings for Blake had grown. Watching him lift Emma onto his shoulders to place the star atop the community Christmas tree, Willow felt her heart swell with an emotion she had not expected to feel again after Thomas's death. Later that evening, as Blake walked them home through the gently falling snow, Willow found the courage to speak. "Blake," she began, her breath forming clouds in the cold air, "about what you said a few months ago." Blake stopped walking, his expression carefully neutral. "Yes. I've been thinking about it, about us." Willow took a deep breath. "Thomas was a good man and I loved him very much, but he's gone and Emma and I have a new life here now." She looked up at Blake, snow catching on her eyelashes. "A life that I'd like you to be part of if you still want to be." Blake's face broke into a smile that warmed Willow despite the cold. "Nothing would make me happier," he said, his voice husky with emotion. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. When she didn't, he pressed his lips gently to hers. The kiss was tender and brief, but it sealed a promise between them. Their courtship progressed through the winter months. Blake joined them for Sunday dinners, took Willow on sleigh rides while Emma stayed with Beatrice, and became a fixture at the schoolhouse, helping with repairs and improvements. By spring, the entire town was speculating about when Blake would propose. Willow tried not to let their gossip affect her, but she couldn't help wondering herself. She had grown to love Blake deeply, and Emma already looked at him as a father figure. The proposal, when it came, was not the grand gesture some might have expected from the territory's most eligible bachelor. Instead, it happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening as they walked along the creek that gave the town its name. "I've been thinking," Blake said, skipping a stone across the water's surface. "The ranch house is too big for just me, has been for years." "Is that so?" Willow replied, trying to keep her voice casual despite the sudden pounding of her heart. "Hum." Blake skipped another stone. "It's got 4 bedrooms, good-sized kitchen, even a room that would make a fine study for a schoolteacher who likes to read in the evenings." Willow smiled. "That sounds lovely." Blake turned to her then, taking both her hands in his. "Willow O'Hara, I love you. I love Emma too, as if she were my own. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Joy bubbled up within Willow, bright and overwhelming. "Yes," she said, squeezing his hands. "Yes, I will marry you, Blake Quinn." Their wedding took place in June, with the entire town in attendance. Emma served as flower girl, her delight at officially becoming Blake's daughter evident in her beaming face. Mayor Thompson performed the ceremony, and Beatrice organized a celebration that would be talked about for years to come. That evening, after Emma had fallen asleep in her new bedroom at the ranch, Blake and Willow stood on the porch, looking out over the land that was now theirs together. "Happy?" Blake asked, his arm around her waist. "More than I ever thought possible again," Willow replied honestly. "You know," Blake said, "I've been thinking about that day we met. If your wagon wheel hadn't snapped, if you hadn't been passing by at that exact moment." Willow continued. "If I hadn't lifted Emma out first." Willow turned in his arms to face him. "It seems like fate had a plan for us all along." "I'm mighty glad it did," Blake murmured before kissing her. The years that followed brought changes to the Quinn ranch. A year after their wedding, Willow gave birth to a son they named William. 2 years later, a daughter they called Abigail joined the family. Emma blossomed into a bright, confident girl who helped care for her younger siblings and excelled in her studies. Willow continued teaching at the schoolhouse, hiring an assistant as Silver Creek grew. Blake's ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful in the territory. Together, they built a life filled with love, hard work, and joy. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Blake surprised Willow with a new wagon sturdier and more elegant than the one that had carried her to Silver Creek. "What do you think?" he asked as she admired it. "It's beautiful," Willow said, "but I hope this one keeps all 4 wheels firmly on the ground." Blake laughed, pulling her close. "I don't know about that. That broken wheel brought me the greatest gifts of my life." Willow rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "It's strange to think how differently our lives might have turned out if not for that accident. I believe we would have found each other somehow," Blake said with quiet conviction. "Some things are just meant to be." As they stood together, the sound of their children's laughter drifted from the house. Willow smiled, thinking of the long journey that had brought her here from the grief-stricken widow leaving Boston to the fulfilled woman she was today. "You know," she said, "I used to think that broken wagon wheel was the worst luck. Now I see it was the best thing that ever happened to me." Blake kissed her forehead. "To us," he corrected. The sun was setting over the Montana hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. In the distance, cattle grazed peacefully on land that stretched as far as the eye could see. This was their home, their legacy, built from a chance encounter on a dangerous road. "Do you ever miss Boston?" Blake asked, a question he'd never posed before. Willow considered it briefly. "Sometimes I miss the libraries, the theaters. But no, I don't truly miss it. Everything I need is right here." That night, as they lay together in the darkness, Willow reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had led her to Blake. A broken wagon wheel, a brave cowboy, a split-second rescue moments that had changed everything. "What are you thinking about?" Blake murmured sleepily beside her. "About how you said now it's your turn, madam, after lifting Emma to safety," Willow replied. "I was so frightened, but something in your voice made me believe everything would be all right." Blake pulled her closer. I knew from that first moment when I saw you trying so hard to be brave for your daughter that you were someone special. I just didn't know then that you'd become my whole world. As the years passed, Silver Creek grew from a small settlement into a proper town. A railroad line came through, bringing new opportunities and challenges. Through it all, Blake and Willow remained pillars of the community, respected and loved by all who knew them. Emma, now a young woman of 18, began teaching alongside her mother at the expanded school. William, at 13, showed every sign of following in his father's footsteps as a rancher. 10-year-old Abigail revealed an artistic talent that Blake encouraged by ordering special art supplies from as far away as San Francisco. On the 20th anniversary of the day they met, Blake and Willow returned to the site of the ravine where her wagon had fallen. The landscape had changed little over the years, though the road was now wider and better maintained. "It doesn't seem as scary now," Willow remarked, looking down at the slope that had once seemed so treacherous. "It was plenty scary at the time," Blake reminded her. "That wagon was balanced on a knife's edge when I rode up." Willow slipped her hand into his, their fingers intertwining with the easy familiarity of 2 decades together. "Thank you for saving us that day." Blake smiled, the lines around his eyes deeper now but his gaze as warm as ever. "Thank you for giving me a reason to keep living. I was just going through the motions before you came along." They stood together for a long moment, remembering the young widow and the lonely rancher they had once been. So much had changed, yet the love that had grown between them remained constant, deepening with each passing year, weathering every storm that life brought their way. "Ready to go home?" Blake asked finally. Willow nodded, her heart full. Home. Not the schoolhouse where they had begun their journey together, but the ranch that had flourished under their care, the house filled with memories and laughter, the family they had built. As they rode back toward Silver Creek, Willow thought about how a single moment of disaster had led to a lifetime of happiness. A broken wagon wheel had set her on a path she could never have imagined that hot summer day in 1878. "Blake," she said as the ranch came into view, their children waiting on the porch to greet them. "Do you believe in fate?" Blake considered the question seriously before answering. "I believe that life gives us chances. It's up to us whether we take them." He smiled at her. "I'm mighty glad I took the chance that day, riding toward the sound of a wagon in trouble instead of minding my own business. And I'm glad I took the chance on a new life in Silver Creek, even though it terrified me," Willow replied. As they approached the house, their children waved excitedly. Emma held her fiancé's hand, a young man who had come west to work as the town's doctor. William stood tall beside his younger sister, who was clutching a drawing she had made for the occasion. This was the legacy of that fateful moment when a wagon wheel snapped and a cowboy came riding to the rescue, a family bound by love, a home built on trust and shared dreams, a future bright with possibility. "You know," Blake said as they dismounted, "I think we've been pretty lucky, all things considered." Willow looked at their children, their home, and finally at Blake himself, the man who had lifted her child to safety, before extending his hand to her with those simple words. "Now it's your turn, madam." "Yes," she agreed, her heart overflowing with gratitude for the life they had created together. "The luckiest people in the world,"